She did not look like the kind of woman a billionaire would notice. Her apron was stained with coffee, her eyes rimmed with fatigue, the kind of pretty the world overlooks when it's too busy chasing gloss and filters. The neon sign outside flickered open, though it was past midnight, rain sliding down the window like veins of light. Capitol Hill's streets were empty, except for the hum of a distant bus and the sigh of the storm. Inside, Anna Reed wiped the counter for the 5th time, though it was already spotless. Her reflection in the glass caught the faint line of a scar running along her right cheekbone, a mark left from an accident 2 years ago that changed how strangers looked at her. She had learned to drop her gaze before they could. A doorbell chimed softly. She turned, expecting another lost soul seeking caffeine. Instead, a tall man stepped in rainwater, glinting on his hair and shoulders. His coat was expensive, but soaked his white shirt, clinging to the sharp lines beneath. His face carried that quiet kind of weariness only wealth could buy. Ethan Cole. He had been on magazine covers on conference stages, and yet at that moment, he looked like someone trying to disappear. Anna's voice, trained to be polite but detached, broke the silence. "Sorry, we're closing soon." He met her eyes, something unreadable flickering there. "I just need a minute," he said, his voice calm, low, unhurried. "Somewhere quiet." She nodded toward a corner booth. "Coffee black," he replied, sitting down, staring at the window, like he was waiting for it to break. When she placed the cup before him, his hands wrapped around it, not to drink, but to feel something warm. Anna went back to cleaning, but she could feel his gaze. Now and then, not intrusive, just curious, as if he was studying the silence itself. "You work here alone?" he asked after a while. "Most nights. People don't talk much at this hour, just caffeine and silence." "That sounds peaceful." "It's lonely," she corrected softly, then instantly regretted it. He looked up. "Lonely can be honest," he said. The rain thickened, turning the windows into shifting mirrors. She poured another pot of coffee, the smell filling the small cafe. "You from around here?" "Not really," he said. "Just visiting an old version of myself." She frowned. "That sounds poetic or dangerous, maybe both." His faint smile was there and gone. When she brought him a refill, her hand brushed the edge of the cup. It tilted hot coffee, spilling across the table and onto her hand. She gasped, pulling back. "I'm so sorry." He stood instinctively reaching for a napkin, then stopped when she flinched. "It's fine," he said quietly. "I needed something real to wake me up." She froze at his tone. He wasn't mocking her. His words sounded tired, almost broken, as though the spill had reminded him that life still had texture. "You're not like most people," she said before thinking. "You don't panic over stains. When everything around you is spotless lies stains. Feel like proof that something still exists." She laughed under her breath, uncertain whether to find that profound or sad. "I guess I'm living proof then," she murmured, rubbing at her apron. "Proof that imperfection's not fatal." He studied her face for a moment longer than comfort allowed. His gaze lingered on the faint scar, and she turned away. "Don't stare," she whispered. "I'm not beautiful." He answered without hesitation. "That's okay. I've had enough of beautiful lies." The words hung in the air, soft but heavy like dust after thunder. She looked at him, searching for irony, but found none. "You say that like beauty hurt you." "It did," he said simply. "The kind that sells and smiles, but never stays." Anna said nothing. She understood more than she should. They fell into quiet again. The clock ticked, the rain slowed. He took a sip, finally grimaced at the bitterness, but drank again anyway. "What's your name?" he asked. "Anna." "Nice to meet you, Anna. I'm Ethan." She gave a small laugh. "You say that like you mean it. Most people don't do." "They not really." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You don't seem like the kind who gets lonely. You'd be surprised what money can't buy." Like sleep, like honesty. Their eyes met again. Something wordless passed between them. Two people standing on opposite sides of glass, recognizing their own reflection in someone else. "You look like someone who draws," he said suddenly. She blinked. "I used to paint. Used to ran out of things worth painting. Maybe you're just looking in the wrong direction." She smiled faintly, the first real smile all night. "And what about you? What do you look for?" He exhaled, almost amused by the question. "Something that doesn't lie back." She tilted her head, puzzled, but intrigued. "That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how hard it is to find." He glanced at the clock. "You're closing." "You don't have to go," she said, before realizing what she'd said. He stood anyway, leaving bills on the counter, far too much for 2 cups of coffee. "Keep the change, it's too much. Then consider it a thank you for reminding me what real looks like." He reached for the door, hesitated. "Be careful out there, Anna. Truth makes enemies, and lies make friends," she asked. "Only until they need to eat you alive." The bell chimed as he left, the wind rushing in cold behind him. She stood there, heart pounding, unsure why a stranger's words felt like a prophecy. Outside, the billionaire disappeared into the rain. Inside, the waitress stared at the empty booth, a single ring of spilled coffee, marking the place he had been. She wiped it, but the stain refused to fade. When she finally turned off the lights, she whispered to the dark, "Maybe that's what real looks like, something that won't wash away." The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled like wet concrete and coffee grounds. A week had passed since the billionaire walked into Anna's life and left her with words that wouldn't let her sleep. She kept telling herself he was just another customer, just another passing storm. But every time the bell above the door chimed, she caught herself looking up too fast. He did not return for 7 days, and when he finally did, the air felt different, charged like the sky before lightning. Ethan Cole stepped through the same door, dry this time, his posture calm, but his eyes restless. The cafe was almost empty, just a trucker by the window, and the hum of an old jazz record on repeat. Anna froze halfway through, pouring a refill for herself. "You again," she said, masking the tremor in her voice, with a practiced smirk. "You make it sound like bad news," he replied, sliding into the same booth. "I was hoping the coffee still tastes like burnt truth." She rolled her eyes, pouring him a cup anyway. "You really came back for this, maybe. Or maybe, what maybe? For the waitress who talks, like she's hiding a book in her heart." Her laugh slipped out, quiet but real. "Books don't pay rent," she said. "But they keep you human," he countered. For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights blinked outside, reflections dancing across his watch, across her face. He looked around the cafe at the walls covered in faded newspaper clippings and a small corkboard of local art sketches. "You did these?" he asked, nodding toward the drawings pinned up with coffee-stained thumbtacks. "Most of them," she admitted. "I sketch when it's slow. Makes the silence friendlier." He stood and walked closer, studying one of the pieces, a simple drawing of a window with rain sliding down, and behind it a blurred face. "You draw loneliness well," he murmured. "Experience," she said. He turned to her. ever think about showing them somewhere real? Here is real enough. I mean a gallery. She shook her head. No one buys sketches of rain, Ethan. I would, he said. That doesn't count. Why not? Because you don't buy things, you collect them. He frowned as if she'd seen too much. Maybe I'm trying to learn how to stop. The tension softened when she changed the subject. So what brings a billionaire to the same dingy coffee shop twice in a week? Silence, he said, taking a sip. And you? She blinked. You're terrible at small talk. That wasn't small. Her pulse betrayed her calm facade. She leaned on the counter, arms folded. You shouldn't flirt with people who can't afford your world. Maybe that's the point, he said. Maybe I'm tired of people who can. His honesty unsettled her more than any arrogance would have. He wasn't charming, he was sincere, and that was far more dangerous. You always talk like that. Only when I mean it. He took out a sleek black card from his coat pocket and scribbled something on the back with her pen. If you ever want to see your art on walls instead of napkins, call me. He set the card down. She didn't pick it up. That's not how the world works, Ethan. Maybe not your world, he said, eyes steady. But it could. She hesitated, staring at the half-finished sketch beside her register, two silhouettes divided by a window pane. When she looked up, he was already standing, adjusting his coat. You always disappear like this, she asked, only when I've said too much. And you think you have, I always do. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that remembered sorrow. She picked up the card after he left. On one side was his name embossed in silver, the kind of thing that smelled like power. On the back in his handwriting, a single line. If you ever want to see your art on walls, instead of napkins, call me. Below it, his number. She exhaled, then tore the card cleanly down the middle, the sharp sound cutting through the music. Half went into the trash, the other half the one with the word honesty. Written beside the number she tucked into her apron pocket without thinking. That night, as she locked up, she replayed every line between them. She thought about how he had looked at her drawings, not with pity, but with recognition, like he had seen the same loneliness in different wallpaper. And yet, she knew how this story ended for people like her. Men like him didn't stay. They had meetings, mergers' lives, too loud for whispers. Still, when she lay in bed later, the city light leaking through blinds, she imagined his voice saying, "Maybe I'm trying to learn how to stop." She hated that it sounded like a confession. Somewhere across the city, Ethan stood on the balcony of his high-rise, staring at the skyline, thinking about the woman who spoke of loneliness as if it were an art form. He poured himself a drink he didn't finish. For the first time in months, he turned off his phone. Down below, Seattle slept under a thin fog. In two different rooms, two people who had barely met were both awake, replaying the same sentence, not knowing that the silence between them was already starting to ache. The next week crawled by in a rhythm of rain and routine, till one night, just before closing the bell, above the cafe door chimed again. Anna didn't look up right away, assuming it was a delivery driver or a student desperate for caffeine. But when she heard his voice soft and familiar, her pulse jumped. "You still keep this place open for ghosts?" Ethan asked, standing by the door. One sleeve of his shirt torn a faint scratch along his forearm. He looked less like a billionaire tonight, more like a man who had fought something invisible and lost. "Rough day?" she asked, nodding at his arm. "Accident," he said, flexing his fingers. "Prototype malfunction. Nothing serious." She gestured to the small first aid kit under the counter. You're lucky I charge extra for first aid." He smiled faintly, sitting where he always did. She came over with antiseptic and a bandage, her movements careful, deliberate. "Hold still," she murmured, dabbing gently at the cut. He flinched when the cold liquid touched skin. "Does it hurt only when you stop?" She gave him a look. "You really don't know how to answer. Normally, do you?" "I forgot how," he said quietly. "Too many boardrooms, not enough people who mean what they say." "You sound like someone escaping a prison," she said, wrapping the bandage around his arm. "Maybe I am. And I'm the parole officer. You're the reminder that not everyone's for sale." His words hung between them. Her hands paused, the bandage half tied. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You care about things that don't pay." She tied the knot tightly, pretending not to hear the way her heart thudded at his tone. "There," she said, stepping back. "Fixed. Thanks." He looked down at the neat bandage, then at her. "You so used to. My mother taught me, so you can fix things. Not everything. That's fine," he said. "I break a lot." Her breath caught. Something in his voice wasn't joking this time. She sat across from him, abandoning the counter. "Why do you come back here, Ethan?" "Because it's the only place where I don't have to pretend I'm okay." "You could see a therapist," she said. He laughed softly. "They charge more and listen less." She smirked despite herself. "That's one way to save money. You think I care about money? I think you use it to keep people from asking why you're lonely." He met her gaze, startled. "And you, what do you use?" Silence. They stared at each other until the clock ticked loud enough to break the spell. She looked away first, reaching for the coffee pot. "Refill always." She poured the aroma, wrapping around them. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. "Sometimes. But where would I go? Anywhere. You could paint again." She laughed softly. "You keep saying that like it's easy." "It's not," he said. "But it's necessary." She sat back, curious now. "Do you actually believe that belief's the only thing I haven't automated?" Her smile faded into something more tender. "You talk like a man trying to find himself in a maze he built." "Maybe I am," he admitted. "And maybe you're the first person who didn't just walk away from the walls." "I don't walk away from messes," she said. "I grew up in one." "Then maybe that's why you can see through mine." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, alive, the kind that carried too many words unspoken. She reached for the bandage again, testing the edge. "You'll need to change this tomorrow," she said. "It'll hold until morning." "You think I'll make it till morning?" "You're dramatic for a man with private jets. I'm human for a man who forgot how to be." Her throat tightened. He caught her eyes and held them. "Why do you hide that scar?" he asked softly. She froze. "Because it makes people uncomfortable." "Does it make you uncomfortable sometimes?" "Then maybe they don't deserve to look." She blinked, startled by the raw gentleness in his tone. "You say things that sound rehearsed but feel too true," she said. "It's not rehearsed," he replied. "It's regret." He stood, flexing his bandaged arm. "You should go home before it rains again." "I live 2 blocks away," she said. "Then I'll walk you. That's unnecessary." "So are most things worth doing." She sighed, locking the register. The street outside shimmered under streetlights' puddles, reflecting yellow halos. They walked side by side, silence stretching comfortably between them. Halfway down the block, thunder rolled somewhere distant. "You're not afraid of storms, are you?" he asked. "Only the ones that start inside," she said. He smiled, more to himself than her. When they reached her building, she stopped. "You really didn't have to walk me. I know," he said. But if I didn't, I'd still be standing there thinking about it. She studied him for a moment, unsure whether to thank him or tell him to leave. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Anna." She watched him turn the corner, his figure swallowed by the mist. Inside her apartment, she unpinned the half of his card, still in her pocket, and placed it on the windowsill. Outside, the streetlight flickered, casting his name across her wall in broken shadows. Across the city, Ethan sat in his car, bandaged arm, resting on the wheel, eyes closed. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or acquisitions. He was thinking about a woman who stitched people with words instead of thread. He whispered into the empty car, "If you ever paint again, paint the world without filters." The invitation arrived 3 days later, slipped into an envelope stamped with the silver crest of Coal Industries. Anna almost threw it away until she saw the handwritten note inside. "Come see what art looks like when it forgets how to feel. E." She stood behind the counter of the cafe, reading it over and over, wondering why a man like him would think she belonged in a room like that. By Saturday night, she decided against going, then changed her mind an hour later, then changed it back again. In the end, curiosity won over caution. She pulled out a simple black dress she had made herself from scraps of fabric she kept. For sewing repairs, ironed it, and walked through the doors of the downtown gallery. Just as the city lights flared outside, the event was everything she feared it would be: glass walls, champagne laughter, the smell of money disguised as perfume. A symphony quartet played something slow and elegant, and people in expensive suits spoke in smiles instead of words. She moved like a shadow through the crowd until she saw him near a sculpture of metal and glass. His posture composed his eyes somewhere far away. Ethan looked immaculate, but when he saw her, the mask cracked. "You came?" he said, surprise, softening his voice. "You invited me," she replied. "I thought it was a joke. I don't joke often. Maybe you should. Maybe I'm trying to remember how." She noticed how every head turned when he spoke to her, like she had broken some invisible rule. "You look," he began, then stopped himself. "Like I don't belong," she finished. "No," he said, "like this room finally does." A photographer nearby lifted his camera, and Ethan subtly stepped closer, blocking the frame. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They feed on what's not theirs." "You really live here?" she asked, glancing around at the chandeliers. "In rooms like this, mostly in the silence between them. And they call this success. They call it a masterpiece," he said. "I call it a graveyard." She tilted her head. "For what? For everything real I buried to make it here." The way he said it made her chest tighten. She wanted to say something kind but couldn't find the right word. Instead, she followed him through the gallery. He introduced her to no one, and yet people watched them as if they were the art. A woman approached, tall, poised her eyes sharp as glass. "Mr. Cole," she said smoothly, "you didn't tell us you were bringing a guest." The pause before the last word cut like a knife. "Marissa," he said calmly. "This is Anna Reed. She's an artist." Really, Marissa's smile was practiced. How inspiring. Anna met her gaze without blinking. "I work nights, sketch on napkins. Sometimes that's enough. We all start somewhere." Marissa said, her tone honeyed with poison. Ethan's jaw tightened. "And some of us never leave," he said, walking away. Anna followed her pulse hammering. "Was that your assistant? She thinks she is. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone who sees through her reflection." They stopped near a painting, an abstract swirl of color, labeled "Perfection in Motion." "What do you see?" he asked. "Noise," she said. "You distraction." He turned toward her. "They call it genius. I call it decoration. Then why are you here? Because I built it." The words were quiet, almost lost beneath the music, but she heard them. "You built this gallery, the company that funded it, the lie that filled it." He looked around, his expression detached. "I thought if I surrounded myself with enough beauty, I'd stop feeling empty. Turns out emptiness just gets a better view." She studied him, seeing not arrogance but exhaustion. "Maybe you just need a different definition of beautiful," she said. "And you," he asked, "what's yours? Something that doesn't apologize for existing." He smiled faintly. "Then you're already there." She didn't know what to say, so she looked away, pretending to admire the paintings. The flash of a camera caught her off guard, and she flinched. The same photographer had turned his lens toward them again. Ethan's hand brushed hers, firm but gentle, lowering it back to her side. "Let them look," he said softly. "They wouldn't understand anyway." Understand what? That the only real thing in this room isn't on the wall. The words should have felt like a line, but they didn't. They felt like truth spoken too loud. Her chest ached from the weight of it. The music changed to a slower piece. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "Here, here, I don't dance, neither do I." She hesitated, then let him take her hand. His touch was warm, steady. They moved awkwardly at first, two strangers learning rhythm through heartbeat. For a brief moment the noise faded, and it was just them. Her scar catching the golden light. His eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "You really think this will go unnoticed?" she whispered. "Let them notice," he said. "Let them see something they can't buy." When the song ended, people clapped politely, unaware that a story had just begun. She pulled back first, her hand slipping from his. "I should go," she said. "Thank you for proving I can survive your world." "You did more than survive," he said. "You changed the air in it." She smiled sadly. "Then I guess I should leave before I ruin it." He watched her walk toward the exit, her dress brushing against polished marble. Marissa stood by the champagne table, her eyes narrowing as she followed their exchange. The camera flash returned one last time, freezing their moment into pixels that would outlive the night. Outside, the rain had returned, tapping gently against the sidewalk. As Anna exhaled, she had walked into a world built on masks, and somehow for one fragile hour, she had been the only one without one. Inside, Ethan watched the doorway, long after she was gone, feeling the silence close in around him like glass. Morning light bled through the blinds of Anna's small apartment, touching the stack of unpaid bills on the table and the single coffee mug that still smelled faintly of cinnamon. Her phone buzzed again and again until the sound became unbearable. When she finally checked it, her breath caught. A photo of her and Ethan, her scar visible. His hand resting lightly at her waist, both caught mid-smile, filled every gossip page and newsfeed in Seattle. The headline screamed, "Tech billionaire's waitress lover exposed." She scrolled through the comments, each one sharper than glass. He must be slumming for charity. She looks like a pity project. Guess honesty doesn't come with makeup. Her stomach turned. The cafe manager called minutes later, his voice tight with fear. "Anna, you can't come in today." The press showed up. "They're outside taking pictures of the window. I'm sorry." The line went dead before she could speak. She set the phone down slowly, the room spinning. Outside, the rain was falling again, blurring the city into watercolor. Across the ocean, Ethan Cole was in Zurich, standing before a boardroom window, while executives congratulated him on closing the biggest partnership of his career. His phone was off his mind on numbers, his smile automatic. It wasn't until late that evening, when his assistant Marissa knocked softly on his suite door, that he learned what had happened. "You should see this," she said, placing a tablet in front of him. The photograph glowed in high-definition headlines, multiplying by the minute. His chest tightened. Who leaked this? Probably the event photographers, Marissa said lightly. The media loves a scandal. You with a waitress, it's good press actually, humanizes you. He stared at her, the words slow to register. She's not a headline, he said. She's a person. And people forget, Marissa said too easily. They'll move on to the next story by next week. Ethan's jaw clenched. Find out who published it first, he said, and shut it down. You can't shut the internet down, she said with a small, knowing smile. But you can control the narrative, post a statement, call it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Distance yourself before it hurts your reputation. My reputation, he echoed, voice cold. You think I care about that, you will, she said softly. You always do. He turned away, jaw tight. Book the next flight home. Back in Seattle, Anna sat at her easel for hours, staring at a blank canvas. She hadn't painted in months, but now her hands itched with fury, with grief, with something raw. She picked up the brush, but it trembled. The scar on her cheek burned under the fluorescent light. She tried to call him once, just once, typing his name and deleting it over and over. Finally, she sent a single message. You said you wanted honesty. Why hide when it costs you nothing? The message was delivered, but never read. What Anna didn't know was that Marissa saw it first. Alone in the hotel suite, she watched the notification dot cross Ethan's tablet before he returned from the meeting. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then swiped it away. She deleted the thread entirely. You'll thank me for this, she whispered to herself. She doesn't belong in your world. The next morning, Ethan's flight landed. He turned on his phone, scrolling through hundreds of messages, pressed shareholders' friends, asking if the rumor was true, but nothing from Anna. He assumed she was furious, ashamed, or both. He drafted a message, deleted it, then poured himself a drink instead. Pride and confusion warred in his chest. By the end of the week, the headlines had turned uglier. Waitress vanishes after billionaire scandal. Mystery woman with the scar. Cameras lingered outside his office building. He made no public statement, and silence became its own confession. Meanwhile, Anna packed her few belongings, left the apartment key on the counter, and disappeared. No note, no forwarding address. The city moved on without her, but in a small storage unit in Portland, she rented a corner space and began to paint again. The first brushstrokes came shaky, hesitant. Then the anger turned to rhythm, the rhythm to grace. On one canvas, she painted a man sitting alone in a cafe. His eyes haunted a coffee cup untouched before him. The title she scrawled beneath it, in thin, deliberate letters, The Man Who Looked Past the Scar. It was the only time she cried while painting. Weeks turned into months. In Seattle, Ethan buried himself in work, but nothing felt the same. Meetings felt hollow, victories dull. At night, he'd catch himself looking out at the rain, half expecting to see her reflection in the glass. You're distracted, Marissa said one evening, stepping into his office. I'm working, he said, without looking up. You're not sleeping, she countered. You're not eating. You're haunted by a girl who used to bring you coffee. She brought more than coffee, he snapped. She brought truth. And I lost it. She used you for attention, Marissa said. That photo, she probably planned it. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp enough to cut. Careful. I'm only saying what everyone else is thinking. Then maybe everyone else is wrong. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. You're losing your edge, Ethan. Emotions make you weak. No, he said quietly. They make you human. When she left, he turned off the lights and sat in the dark, the glow of the city tracing harsh lines across his face. Somewhere a piano played faintly from a nearby building, a melody both familiar and distant. He wondered if she was hearing it too. A month later, his PR team presented their findings. The source of the leak, his advisor said carefully, appears to be internal. Someone inside your staff had early access to the gala photos. Ethan's stomach dropped. Who? The advisor hesitated. All signs point to your executive assistant. Marissa's name echoed through his thoughts like thunder. He left the meeting without a word and walked straight to her office. She looked up startled when he entered. Ethan, why? His voice was low, dangerous. Why would you do that? She straightened. You were slipping. She was ruining your focus, your credibility. I was trying to protect you by destroying someone who never asked for any of this. She didn't belong with you. Marissa's mask cracked, tears cutting through her makeup. I've been here since the beginning, Ethan. I know how you think. I've been beside you through every loss, every failure, and you throw it away for someone who serves coffee. He stared at her for a long, cold moment. You don't understand at all, he said softly. She didn't serve coffee, she served honesty. And I killed it by letting people like you speak for me. You're making a mistake, she whispered. No, he said. I already made it. I just won't make it twice. He walked past her, his voice calm but final. You're fired, effective immediately. She didn't try to stop him. When the elevator doors closed, Ethan felt nothing, no anger, no triumph, only an ache deep enough to hollow him out. That night he drove with no destination, the rain chasing him down every street. He ended up outside the cafe where they had first met. It was closed, the windows dark, but the faint stain of spilled coffee still marked the table where she once sat. He traced his fingers over it, whispering to the empty room. You were right, Anna. Lies are easy. Truth costs everything. Then he walked back into the rain, a man finally stripped of everything that wasn't real. 3 months passed, and the silence became its own kind of noise. Ethan Cole's penthouse overlooked a city that no longer cared about him, glass walls reflecting the glow of billboards, advertising lives that weren't his. The tabloids had moved on to newer scandals, younger faces, shinier lies, but he couldn't. Every night he sat by the window, whiskey untouched, watching the rain draw veins across the glass. The world below still pulsed with light, but inside everything had gone still. He thought about Anna when it rained, when it didn't, when his phone vibrated, and when it didn't. Her voice, her quiet honesty, her hands that trembled only when the truth was too close. She haunted him more gently than guilt ever could. One night, his housekeeper left an envelope on his desk. It was from Lauren, his ex-wife. He almost ignored it, but curiosity or maybe penance made him open it. The handwriting was sharp and elegant. Ethan, I saw the photo. You looked happier than I ever remember. Maybe because she looked real. Don't make the same mistake twice. He exhaled the weight of the past settling heavy in his chest. Lauren had left him 2 years ago, their marriage collapsing under the weight of appearances. She had wanted parties and praise, and he had given her everything but presents. He remembered the last fight clearly, her shouting, "You care more about being admired than being known." She wasn't wrong. He had built his empire on the currency of perception, and it had left him rich, respected, and utterly alone. Later that week, he ran into her at a fundraiser. Lauren still looked like the perfect photograph hairstyled smile, poised, but her eyes had softened with time. "You look tired," she said, holding her champagne like a shield. "You look rehearsed," he replied. She smirked. "You used to like rehearsed. I used to mistake it for love." She tilted her head. "So what happened to the waitress?" "She saw through me," he said simply. "And you let her go." "No," he admitted. "I watched her walk away and called it safety." Lauren studied him, something between pity and nostalgia in her gaze. "You finally met someone real, Ethan. And you did to her what you did to me. You looked away." The words hit harder than they should have. He wanted to defend himself but couldn't. "What would you have me do?" he asked. "Start by not pretending." She said softly, "It's the only thing you've never tried." He left early that night, her voice following him into the cold air. The next morning he couldn't shake her words. He dug through his old phone records, credit card logs, anything that might tell him where Anna had gone. It took a week before he found it, one payment made under her name to a small art gallery in Portland. He drove there himself, 4 hours of highway, and regret stretching ahead. When he arrived, the gallery was closed. Through the glass, he saw paintings, small, intimate, painfully beautiful. One in particular caught his eye, a man sitting in a cafe, staring out a rain-streaked window. The title on the tag read, "The Man Who Looked Past the Scar." His throat tightened. She had painted him. He pressed his palm to the glass, whispering, "You're still painting." But she wasn't there. The curator arrived moments later, a kind older woman who recognized his name but said nothing of it. "She works here part-time," the woman said. "Quiet girl, talented, kind eyes. But she doesn't talk much about Seattle." "When will she be back?" he asked. "Tomorrow, maybe, or next week. She disappears for days sometimes. Artists, you know." He thanked her and left the sound of rain following him to his car. That night he stayed in a motel outside town, unable to leave, unable to sleep. He stared at the ceiling, imagining her in that gallery, sleeves rolled up, paint on her fingers, her silence no longer defensive but free. He realized then that he had never really known how to listen, not to her, not to anyone, not even to himself. Back in Seattle, Marissa's absence at the office was palpable but irrelevant. The company functioned fine without her, maybe even better. Yet the walls of his success felt emptier than ever. He began declining events, ignored investor dinners, and quietly donated large sums to shelters and art programs under anonymous names. It wasn't redemption, it was restlessness disguised as purpose. One evening, while sorting old files, he found a photo taken years ago at his wedding to Lauren. In it, his smile was perfect, his eyes hollow. He tore it in half and threw it away. The next day, he sent a resignation email to his board. Effective immediately. "Find someone who still believes in perfection. I'm done pretending." The message caused a storm in the industry, but for the first time he didn't care. He packed a small bag, grabbed his car keys, and left the city without telling anyone. He drove back to Portland, stopping at the same cafe along the way that smelled faintly of roasted beans and rain-soaked brick. He sat by the window, same as before, but this time he wasn't waiting for anyone to join him. He was waiting to be ready. When the sun set, he whispered to the empty seat across from him. You said you painted the world without filters. Maybe I'll learn to see it that way too. Somewhere miles away, Anna was cleaning her brushes, unaware that the man who had broken her heart was learning how to hold it again, this time with both hands open. For now, silence was enough. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. And sometimes that was the first step back to being human. The rain in Portland had a gentler rhythm than Seattle's. It didn't accuse, it forgave. The small gallery sat on the corner of Pine and Madison, a quiet street lined with thrift shops and coffee carts. A place where people didn't need perfection to be noticed. Anna Reed stood inside, arranging her canvases under the muted light of the gallery's track lamps. The air smelled of turpentine rain and old wood. Her hands were streaked with paint, her hair pulled back loosely, the exhaustion of creation resting beautifully on her shoulders. She was alive in the way only people who have rebuilt themselves from silence could be. It had been nearly 4 months since she'd seen Ethan. His name had become a whisper she'd stopped saying aloud, but not one she could forget. The gallery owner, a woman named Ruth, smiled at her from the front desk. Your work draws people. In Anna, she said, it's like your paintings breathe for the ones who've forgotten how. Anna smiled faintly. Maybe that's because they come from someone who forgot first. That afternoon, a new exhibition opened local artists' small audience. Nothing grand, nothing staged. Just truth in frames. Anna wore a linen dress smudged at the hem, with blue paint, her scar visible in the soft light. People came and went, pausing at her pieces, murmuring quiet admiration. But she barely heard them. Her mind wandered elsewhere toward rain-soaked memories and the man who once told her he was tired of beautiful lies. As evening settled, the door opened, the bell chimed softly, and for a second her breath caught. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his black coat glistening under the gallery lights. He looked smaller than she remembered, not in height, but in armor. His eyes found her instantly, like magnets drawn to their missing half. For a moment, neither moved. Then he walked toward her, each step hesitant, deliberate, like approaching a fragile truth. You found me, she said quietly. I never stopped looking, he replied. His voice carried the tremor of a man who'd rehearsed this moment in his head and failed every time. I thought you were gone, she said. I was, he admitted. But ghosts can come back if they remember who they were before they died. She wanted to be angry, to tell him that ghosts don't get second chances. But when she saw his eyes, she saw no arrogance, left only remorse. Why are you here, Ethan? She asked. To see your art, he said, and to remember what honesty looks like. He moved slowly, studying the canvases on the wall. Each one told a story she hadn't dared to speak. There were self-portraits that weren't of faces, but of feelings, loneliness, painted as light through fog grief, shaped like cracked glass. And then there was the one that stopped him completely, the man who looked past the scar. It showed him sitting at the cafe table, his reflection blurred in rain, her figure faintly visible in the background. His throat tightened. You painted me, he whispered. No, she said. I painted what you saw in me before you stopped seeing. He turned toward her, words caught somewhere between apology and disbelief. Anna, he said softly, I didn't know my silence could be that loud. It was deafening, she replied, her voice steady but trembling beneath. When the world screamed lies, you said nothing. And silence can wound worse than words. He nodded the truth, sinking deep. You deserved better. I didn't want better, she said. I wanted honest. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain tapping the glass, the faint echo of other visitors murmuring in distant rooms. Ethan reached for the guest book on the table and picked up a pen. When he tried to write, his hand shook an old injury from an accident years ago, one that never fully healed. The pen wobbled, ink blotting the page. He cursed under his breath, embarrassed. Anna stepped closer, placing her hand gently over his. "It's okay to shake," she said softly. "Art needs trembling hands." He looked up at her eyes, glistening, breath uneven. "You always know how to turn pain into something worth keeping. Because it's the only thing that ever stayed," she whispered. Their hands lingered together, over the paper still trembling but no longer afraid. "I thought success would make me whole," he said, "but all it did was teach me how to live without touch. You changed that. You made the world unfiltered." She smiled sadly. "And you made me believe that honesty wasn't a weakness, until you proved it could be." "Then let me prove something else," he said, voice cracking slightly. "That regret can be rebuilt into something true." She shook her head slowly. "You can't rebuild trust, Ethan. You can only live differently and hope someone notices." "Then I'll start living," he said, "and I'll wait as long as it takes." The vulnerability in his words disarmed her. He wasn't demanding forgiveness. He was offering transparency. "You don't need to wait," she said quietly. "You just need to be real, even when no one's watching." "That's all I want now," he said. "To be real." The gallery was almost empty now. Ruth dimmed the lights, giving them privacy. She pretended not to notice. Anna stepped closer, studying his face, as though painting it again in her mind. He looked older but lighter, like a man who had finally set down something heavy. "You're different," she said. "I had to lose everything false to find what mattered." "And what matters you," he said simply. "Not because you forgave me, because you remind me I'm still capable of truth." Her eyes softened, tears unshed. "You always had truth in you, Ethan. You just buried it under mirrors." He exhaled shakily, as if her words had loosened something inside him. "If I could go back," he said, "I'd stand beside you in that crowd and tell them who you were, not who they thought you were." "You can't rewrite the past," she said, "but you can repaint it." "Then let me paint it with you," he whispered. The silence that followed wasn't cold anymore. It was alive, trembling like the space between two brush strokes. She looked down at their hands, still touching, still shaking. For the first time in months, she didn't pull away. The morning after he saw her again, Ethan woke to a city still drenched from last night's rain. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for his phone to check market updates or investor messages. Instead, he stared at the blank ceiling of his hotel room, thinking about her voice. Her eyes, the way she said, "You can't rebuild trust. You can only live differently and hope someone notices." Those words became a heartbeat in his head. That afternoon, while the world moved on with deadlines and noise, Ethan sat before a white backdrop in his company's recording studio. There was no makeup artist, no PR script, no lighting crew, just a camera, a microphone, and a truth he could no longer bury. He pressed record, the red light blinking like a pulse. His voice came out rough, unsteady. "My name is Ethan Cole," he began. "I've spent years building things. Companies, wealth walls, but none of it was honest. I thought success was proof of worth. I was wrong." He paused, breathing out slowly. This isn't a press statement, it's a confession. The words seemed to echo in the empty room. He looked directly into the lens. Her name is Anna Reed. You've seen her face. Some of you mocked her. Some of you called her names. I didn't defend her, and that silence cost me more than any scandal could. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to keep going. She wasn't a headline. She wasn't a distraction. She was the only honest thing I've ever known. And I failed her because I was afraid to be seen for who I really am, a coward hiding behind glass. He stopped the recording there, but something in him said it wasn't enough. He turned the camera back on. If you're watching this, he said softly, don't waste years protecting lies. The truth hurts less than regret. He leaned back, exhaling hard, then clicked save. No team, no approval. He uploaded it himself to his company's official channel, to his personal accounts, to every platform he'd ever used to perform perfection. Then he turned off his phone and walked outside into the crisp air, not knowing that the world was about to stop and look. Within an hour, the video went viral, not because of algorithms or sponsorships, but because people recognized sincerity when they saw it. His words weren't rehearsed, they trembled. His eyes weren't dry, they confessed. Comment sections filled with shock, then empathy, then something rare respect. This isn't PR. This is real. He's owning it. Maybe we've all been lying too long. Anna found out when Ruth called her voice breathless. Anna, turn on the news, now. She hesitated, heart pounding. She opened her laptop, and there he was, on every feed, every trending topic, Ethan Cole, billionaire turned human. The caption beneath the thumbnail read, "She was the only honest thing I've ever known." She clicked play. His voice filled her small apartment, the same voice that once hid behind charm, now cracked with vulnerability. As he spoke her name, her chest tightened so sharply it hurt. She whispered to the screen, "What are you doing, Ethan?" But she knew. He was doing what she'd told him to, living differently and hoping someone noticed. By the end of the video, tears blurred her vision. He looked straight into the camera and said, "Anna, if you ever see this, know that I didn't stay silent because you weren't worth it. I stayed silent because I wasn't brave enough to be seen beside you. I am now." The video cut to black. She sat there in stunned silence as the rain outside began to fall again, soft, relentless. Ruth appeared at her door an hour later holding her phone. "Anna," she said, "you need to see this." She turned the screen. Lauren, Ethan's ex-wife, had reposted the confession on her social media with a caption that read, "Some men change when they meet the right truth." Thousands were sharing it, quoting it, arguing, crying. A movement began. Hashtags about honesty, self-worth, and forgiveness flooded timelines. For once, the internet wasn't mocking someone. It was remembering what sincerity looked like. But Anna didn't feel triumphant. She felt exposed again. The attention, the noise, it all terrified her. She went to the gallery after closing lights off, sitting on the floor, surrounded by her paintings. She whispered to herself, "You did it, Ethan. You told the truth." But what now? She didn't have an answer. Neither did he. Back in Seattle, Ethan's office, phone rang nonstop. Journalists wanted interviews. Investors wanted statements. His board wanted explanations. He ignored them all. He sat at his desk, staring at the rain beyond his window. His assistant, a new one, poked her head in. "Sir, CNN wants to." "No," he said gently. "I'm not explaining honesty to anyone. It explains itself." Then after a long silence, he asked, "What's the forecast tomorrow?" "Rain again, sir." He nodded. "Good." That night he returned to the same cafe where everything had begun. It had reopened under new management, but the layout was the same corner booth, the same ring of coffee on the wooden table. He ordered black coffee and sat by the window, watching the streetlights shimmer through puddles. Hours passed. The waitress offered to refill his cup, but he shook his head. "I'm waiting for someone." "A date," she teased. "No," he said softly, a truth. The doorbell chimed once, twice, then stilled. But Anna didn't come. He stayed until the sign flipped to closed and the lights dimmed. Then he stepped out into the rain, letting it soak him completely. For the first time, he didn't hide from it. As he walked, he heard laughter, real human laughter, from strangers passing by. And for a fleeting moment, he felt at peace. Across the city, Anna replayed the video again, her fingers trembling. She didn't know if she could face him. She didn't know if forgiving him meant forgiving herself for believing too much. But the rain outside whispered the same rhythm it always had when he was near. You can't rebuild trust. You can only live differently. She closed her laptop, grabbed her coat, and stepped into the storm. The streets glowed with reflections, and somewhere ahead she knew he'd be waiting. The world had seen the billionaire confess, but the real confession, the one that mattered, was still waiting to be spoken between two people in the rain. The rain came down heavier than it had in weeks. The kind of storm that blurred the edges of the world and washed the streets into mirrors. Ethan stood beneath the awning of the cafe, soaked despite his coat, his hair clinging damply to his forehead. It was nearly midnight. The neon sign buzzed above him, flickering red and white, echoing the pulse in his chest. Every passing car sent ripples through puddles. Every footstep that wasn't hers made his heart falter. He didn't know if she'd seen his video, didn't know if she'd ever forgive him, but he knew that if truth meant anything, he had to stand there until she did, or until the rain erased him. The cafe lights dimmed as the staff prepared to close, but the manager recognized him from the news and left him be. A bell jingled faintly as the door opened one last time. She stood there framed by the doorway, rain dripping from her hair, an umbrella broken in her hand. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Her eyes were tired, red-rimmed from tears, or from the weather, he couldn't tell. "You're really here," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the rain. "I didn't think you would wait." "I told you I'd live differently," he said. "This is me keeping my word." She stepped closer, the wind catching her coat. "You stood in front of millions and said my name," she said quietly. "Do you have any idea what that did?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for them, Anna. I did it because silence was killing me. And maybe it was killing you too. You think a confession fixes everything?" she asked. "It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't erase how alone I felt." He nodded. "I know. I'm not asking you to erase it. I just don't want to hide from it anymore." The rain slid between them like glass. She looked at him for a long, trembling second before saying, "I'm still not beautiful, Ethan." He stepped forward, closing the distance. "I never saw the scar," he whispered. "I only saw you fighting to live." Her breath caught the words, unraveling the last of her defenses. "You don't get to say things like that," she said, tears breaking free, blending with the rain. "You don't get to show up after all this time and sound like the man I kept hoping you'd become." He reached for her hand, hesitated midair, then let it fall. "I didn't come to sound like anything. I came because you were right. About everything. I built my life on noise, and you were the only quiet that ever felt honest. She stared at him, the storm reflected in her eyes. You hurt me, Ethan. You let them ruin me, and you did nothing. I did worse, he said. I convinced myself I was protecting you by staying silent, but I was just protecting the lie that I still had control. She shook her head, turning slightly away. You can't just undo it, I know, he said, but maybe we can start over, not from where we were, but from who we are now. She looked back at him, eyes searching. And who are you now? He smiled faintly, rain dripping from his lashes. Someone who'd rather be drenched in truth than dry in lies. The silence that followed was fragile, suspended between heartbreak and hope. The wind picked up scattering leaves across the wet pavement. She took a slow step forward, closing the last inch between them. You're still impossible, she murmured. So are you, he replied. For the first time in months, she smiled, a small, real thing, trembling but alive. He lifted his hand again, this time not to touch but to offer. She looked at it for a long moment before taking it. Their fingers interlocked, cold but steady. The rain poured harder, drumming against the awning, their breaths mingling in the gray light. You think we can really do this? She asked. Be honest even when it hurts. Only way worth living, he said. She tilted her head, her wet hair clinging to her cheek. Then tell me something true. He looked at her eyes, steady voice, quiet. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know what love meant until I lost it. Her throat tightened, her heart splitting open. And I never stopped believing you could be better, she whispered. Even when you proved me wrong. Then maybe we're both fools, he said, and she laughed softly through her tears. Maybe fools are the only ones brave enough to start again. Without another word, he pulled her gently into his arms. She hesitated for a breath, then melted into him, her face against his chest. The rhythm of their heartbeats sinking beneath the sound of rain. The city disappeared around them. It was just two people standing in the downpour, letting everything false wash away. You're freezing, he murmured. So are you. Then we'll freeze together. She laughed again, the sound muffled against his coat. When she finally looked up, his forehead rested against hers. Their eyes met, no performance, no masks, just exhaustion and truth. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his thumb tracing the line of her scar. It's part of you, he said, and I'll never pretend not to see it again. She closed her eyes, tears mixing with rain. You see me now, she whispered. I've never stopped, he said. And then he kissed her slowly, softly, as if afraid the moment might break. It wasn't a grand cinematic kiss. It was trembling human, full of forgiveness and fear, and the fragile hope of beginning again. Around them, the rain kept falling heavy and relentless, but for the first time it felt cleansing instead of cruel. When they finally pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his chest. What happens now? She asked. We get coffee, he said, smiling faintly. And we start living like people who don't need to be perfect to be worth it. She laughed quietly. You're still terrible at romance. Good, he said. I'd rather be honest. The storm softened as they stepped inside the cafe, hand in hand, leaving puddles on the floor. Outside, the world shimmered with light. Reflected off wet streets, the sound of rain, still whispering the same old truth, that even after ruined love can return, not as a fairy tale, but as something real enough to stand in the storm. 1 year later, the rain in Seattle felt different. Softer, kinder, as if it had learned how to fall without breaking everything it touched. On a quiet corner of Capitol Hill stood a small cafe with an old-fashioned wooden sign that read, "Honest Grounds." Outside, morning light spilled through the windows, dust dancing in golden streaks above the tables. The smell of fresh coffee, vanilla, and paint lingered in the air, blending into something warm and alive. Behind the counter, Anna moved gracefully, her hair tied loosely, a faint smile resting on her lips. The scar on her cheek caught the light every now and then, not as something to hide, but as proof she'd survived. On the wall above the register hung a framed painting, the first she'd ever sold, "The Man Who Looked Past the Scar." Beneath it was a small brass plaque that read, "For Those Who Dare to Be Seen." Ethan entered quietly, carrying a box of roasted beans from the new supplier he'd insisted on handling himself. He wasn't a CEO anymore, not in the way the world defined it. After his public confession, he'd stepped down, sold most of his shares, and started a foundation named Beautiful Truth, dedicated to funding artists and women rebuilding their lives after being written off by appearances. Some called him foolish. He called it freedom. "You're late," Anna said, smiling without looking up. "You say that every morning," he replied, setting the box on the counter. "Because it's true every morning. Honesty's overrated," he teased, then added, "except when it's coming from you." She raised an eyebrow. "Flattery doesn't count as honesty. Then I must be getting better at both." He leaned on the counter, watching her pour coffee into a chipped ceramic mug. "Still my favorite mug always," she said. It had a faint crack near the handle, mended with gold lacquer, the Japanese art of kintsugi. Repairing what's broken with something precious. She'd done it herself one night, when he'd spilled it by accident. "It reminds me that some things are better after they've been broken," she'd said then, and he'd never forgotten it. So he said, glancing around the cafe, "How's our masterpiece doing today?" "Sold out of blueberry scones." 3 new customers asked about art lessons, and someone left a note saying the world needs more places like this. "Then we're doing okay," he said softly. She smiled. "We're doing real." He reached for her hand across the counter, just a brush of fingers, not for show, not for reassurance, just connection. Outside, the city moved in its usual rush, unaware that a small miracle lived on this corner. The bell above the door jingled, and an older man entered carrying a newspaper. He nodded at them both. "Morning, you two." Coffee and the truth, as always. Anna laughed, preparing his usual. Ethan sat by the window, gazing out at the drizzle. The world beyond the glass was imperfect, messy, loud, beautiful in ways it had never been before. When Anna joined him, 2 cups in hand, he asked, "Do you ever miss the quiet before all this?" "No," she said simply. Back then, quiet was empty. Now it's full. They sat together, sipping coffee, the hum of life around them. "You ever regret giving up the empire?" she asked after a while. He shook his head. "Empires don't last. But this," he said, gesturing to the cafe, to her, to the rain beyond the window, "this feels like something that will." "You sound sentimental," she teased. "I sound honest," he corrected. She leaned against him, her voice softer. "That's still the only thing I ever wanted." He kissed her temple, then murmured, "You built all this from truth, Anna. You didn't just forgive me. You taught me how to stay forgiven." She smiled. "And you stopped running from yourself." "Mostly," he said, still learning. They watched as a young couple entered the cafe, a girl with paint on her hands, a man in a rumpled shirt. Anna greeted them with warmth, recognizing something of their old selves in the pair. "Welcome to Honest Grounds," she said, Everything here's made fresh, and we don't serve lies." The couple laughed, unaware of the story behind the joke. Ethan watched her, the ease in her movement, the peace that had replaced her old caution. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. She glanced at him, eyes shining. "I'm scarred," she reminded him. Same thing he whispered. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the rain slowed, leaving drops glimmering like scattered stars on the window. Anna rested her head against his shoulder. "You think it ever really ends?" she asked. "The storms?" "No," he said, "but you build better roofs, and you learn to love the sound." She laughed quietly, intertwining her fingers with his. For a long time they simply sat there, no secrets left, no masks to wear, no need to perform. Just two people who had found their way through the storm and discovered that honesty, fragile and stubborn, could hold. The camera of life panned outward, the sign swaying slightly in the breeze, the windows fogged from warmth inside, and the faint sound of laughter drifting into the street. In a world obsessed with beautiful lies, honest ground stood like a heartbeat, reminding everyone who passed that truth. Though imperfect, was still the most beautiful thing left to build on. If this story touched something in you, take a breath before you scroll away. Look around your own world for the Annas and Ethans, the ones who've stopped pretending, who dare to show their scars, who still choose to believe that honesty, even when it hurts, is worth it. Maybe you've been on Anna's side, hiding behind the belief that you're not enough. Or maybe you've been Ethan, trapped by pride until it's too late. Either way, this story is a mirror, and if you saw even a flicker of yourself in it, don't let that feeling pass quietly. Drop a comment below and tell me what honesty means to you. Do you think love can survive the truth, or does it only start when the lies end? I want to hear your heart, not your filters, because Emma's Stories isn't just about fictional love. It's about the kind that makes you pause, the kind that reminds you what it means to be human. If you believe that beauty isn't perfection, but presence, that love isn't performance but patience, then you belong here. Subscribe not for algorithms or updates, but because you're part of this circle, people who still believe in stories that see you, not sell to you. Share this video with someone who's forgotten that honesty can be beautiful even when it's messy. Maybe it'll reach someone standing in their own rain, waiting for forgiveness they think they don't deserve. Let it remind them that truth isn't the end of love, it's where it finally begins. Every view, every comment, every whisper of recognition keeps this channel alive, not through numbers, but through connection. And if this story found you at a time when you needed to remember that broken things can still shine, then maybe that's no accident. Maybe you were meant to hear it. Because somewhere out there, someone else is listening too. Someone who needs to know they're not alone in trying to build a life on truth. So before you leave, write one word in the comments that defines love for you today. Maybe it's forgiveness, maybe courage, maybe truth. Let's fill the space below with reminders that real love doesn't fade when it's seen. Clearly, it deepens. This is Emma's Stories, and I'm glad you're here. If you felt something, share it. If you believe in second chances, prove it. And if you've ever whispered, "I'm not beautiful," may this be the story that teaches you the gentlest truth, that honesty, not beauty, is what makes someone unforgettable.